The sun blazed mercilessly over the barren Arizona desert, its golden rays beating down on wagon wheels that creaked and groaned under their heavy loads. The year was 1874, and the West was still wild, dangerous, and untamed. Dust rose in swirling clouds behind the caravan as families pushed westward, their faces hardened by hardship but lit with hope for a better future. Among them rode Samuel and Margaret Carter, a young couple with a 2-year-old boy in their arms. His name was Daniel, and his bright green eyes sparkled with curiosity even in the oppressive heat. His father rode ahead on horseback, his hand never far from his rifle, while his mother sat in the back of the wagon, singing softly to the boy as the wheels jostled over uneven terrain. Margaret Carter's heart was uneasy. The desert felt too quiet. She had heard stories of raids, of Apache warriors striking swiftly and disappearing into the canyons like spirits. Her husband had reassured her that they'd be safe, but her instincts told her otherwise. She kept her arms wrapped tightly around her child, rocking him gently as if her embrace alone could protect him. The ambush came without warning. A shrill war cry echoed from the cliffs, startling the oxen and sending panic through the caravan. Arrows rained down from above, piercing wagon covers and striking men from their saddles. Bullets cracked from rifles as settlers scrambled to defend themselves, but the attack was swift and brutal. Apache warriors descended like a whirlwind, their painted faces fierce, their ponies moving with lightning speed. The caravan erupted in chaos, screams, gunfire, and the splintering of wood filled the air. Horses bolted, wagons overturned, and families scattered in terror. Samuel Carter fired desperately from his horse, shouting for Margaret to stay low, but a bullet struck him in the chest, throwing him from his saddle. Margaret screamed, clutching Daniel tightly as the wagon shook from the impact of arrows. She crawled toward the edge, desperate to reach her husband, but a shadow loomed over her. A young Apache warrior stood before her, his dark eyes locked on hers. His face was marked with streaks of red paint, his long black hair tied back with a strip of leather. He raised his hand in a gesture of command, but Margaret mistook it for a threat. She clutched her baby tighter, whispering prayers under her breath. And then, just as she turned to shield Daniel, a gunshot cracked through the air. Margaret stiffened, a dark red bloom spreading across her dress. She fell backward, gasping for breath, her wide eyes fixed on her baby's face. With trembling hands, she tried to push Daniel toward the Apache warrior. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Save him." The warrior knelt, gently lifting the crying child from her arms. He looked down at the lifeless woman and then at the boy, his fierce expression softening. Around him, his warriors looted the wagons, gathering weapons and supplies. "Chike," one of them called. "We should leave." The warrior, Chike, glanced around at the carnage, his jaw tightening. "Take only what we need. Burn the rest." The warriors obeyed, and moments later, the caravan was reduced to smoking ruins. Chike mounted his horse with Daniel cradled in his arms, riding off into the desert as the sun dipped low behind the cliffs. The boy had been spared, not by chance, but by the heart of a warrior who saw something in his green eyes that stirred his spirit. Years passed, and Daniel Carter was no longer Daniel. The Apache called him Taklashim, White Eyes, because of the striking color of his eyes. He grew up under Chike's watchful care, running barefoot through canyons, learning to ride ponies before he could run, and mastering the bow and arrow with precision. He spoke Apache fluently, laughed with the other children, and listened intently as the elders told stories by the fire. To him, this was home. But not everyone in the tribe welcomed him. Some saw him as a bad omen, a white child among their people during a time of constant war with settlers and soldiers. Whispers followed him wherever he went. Chike silenced these voices with his authority, declaring that Taklashim was his son and Apache by spirit, but the unease never truly disappeared. Taklashim himself began to sense his difference as he grew older. He would stare at his reflection in the river and see pale skin where his friends had copper tones, hair a lighter shade than theirs, and green eyes that marked him as other. When he was 12, he asked Chike why he was different. "You are a gift from the spirits," Chike told him. "They brought you to me for a reason. You will walk between two worlds, Taklashim. That is your path." Though he didn't understand the meaning of those words, Taklashim accepted them. He trained hard, becoming a skilled hunter and tracker. His closest companion was Nazcha, Chike's niece, who was as fearless as she was beautiful. The two were inseparable, racing horses through the desert, climbing cliffs, and dreaming by the river. Nazcha was his anchor, the one who made him feel truly Apache. But as Taklashim neared manhood, the tension between settlers and Apache tribes grew worse. The U.S. Army patrolled the territory, hunting down Apache warriors and forcing families onto reservations. Chike refused to submit, leading his people into the mountains where they could fight and survive. One summer evening, scouts returned with news of a wagon train heading through their territory. Supplies were low, and Chike decided they would raid the wagons. Taklashim rode with him, his bow and rifle slung across his back, but unease gnawed at his heart. Over the years, he had seen too much bloodshed.
La noche del desierto era fría, y las estrellas brillaban como clavos de plata clavados en un cielo negro. Sam Carter, un vaquero curtido que no poseía más que una silla gastada y una yegua alazán cansada, cabalgaba solo entre los cañones. Entonces la vio, una mujer apache, no mayor de 20 años, desplomada contra una roca. Tenía la pierna desgarrada por un disparo, la respiración entrecortada. Sus ojos se clavaron en los de él, llenos de miedo, aunque demasiado débiles para resistirse. Sam entendió lo que significaba. Ayudarla era arriesgar su vida, seguir de largo era salvarla. Pero el corazón del vaquero pesaba más que su miedo. Sin decir palabra, la alzó sobre su silla y le entregó las riendas con manos firmes pero suaves. «La necesitarás más que yo», susurró. La mujer lo miró atónita, mientras él se alejaba a pie hacia la oscuridad del desierto, con nada más que la ropa puesta. Al amanecer, Sam casi se desplomaba, los labios agrietados, los pies sangrando sobre la arena ardiente. Esperaba que la muerte lo alcanzara pronto. Pero entonces oyó un trueno en el horizonte, no de tormenta, sino de caballos. 70 guerreros apaches se acercaban, levantando polvo como humo detrás de ellos. Sam se irguió, aunque sus piernas temblaban. Pensó que había llegado su fin. Pero los jinetes frenaron. Al frente venía la mujer herida, ahora erguida y fuerte, montada sobre su yegua alazán. Levantó la mano, y todos los guerreros detuvieron a la vez a sus caballos. Ella habló en su lengua, y aunque Sam no entendía, sintió el peso de sus palabras. Entonces, uno de los guerreros desmontó y le ofreció su caballo. Otro hizo lo mismo. Y luego otro. Hasta que 70 caballos quedaron frente a él. El jefe asintió una sola vez, con los ojos encendidos de respeto. Sam Carter, un vaquero que había entregado su único caballo, ahora tenía más de los que cualquier hombre podría soñar. Pero más que caballos, había ganado algo más raro en la frontera, un lazo de honor imposible de romper. Y el desierto, tan cruel como siempre, de pronto se sintió un poco menos solitario.
They moved like ghosts, staying ahead of their pursuers, until they found refuge in a remote valley. But their numbers were few, their supplies low, and their spirits broken. Taklashim stood over Chaik's grave, the weight of responsibility heavy on his shoulders. He was no longer just a boy raised by the Apache. He was their leader now, whether they accepted him or not. As he looked out over the desert, Taklashim knew his path was no longer simple. He carried the blood of two worlds, and perhaps only he could bridge them. The West was changing, settlers would keep coming, soldiers would keep hunting, and the Apache way of life was fading. But Taklashim was determined to fight, not just with weapons, but with wisdom. He would become a legend, the white-eyed Apache warrior, a man born of tragedy but forged in fire, whose loyalty lay not with skin color but with family, honor, and the spirit of the land. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold. Taklashim mounted his horse, Nazca riding at his side. Together, they led their people deeper into the mountains, where they would regroup, survive, and fight another day. The wind carried whispers of his name, a name that would one day become legend in both the white man's world and the Apache's, the boy who had been saved, who grew up as one of the people, and who would forever walk the line between two worlds.